Howdy, everyone. Just a real quick snippet here. I want to demonstrate why it is very important to use a dedicated ground between the engine and the fuselage. So again, the engine is in work, but it is physically mounted to the engine mounts, and the mount is physically mounted to the airplane. But that does not mean that you have a direct ground path between the two. So if I can do this one-handed, I have a multimeter here. I've got it set on continuity, basically. And what that does is, if there is continuity, you'll get a tone. Sorry, I'm trying to do this one-handed. So here are the probes, and if I touch them, you get an audio tone of continuity, right? So if I lay this meter, hopefully without scratching something, if I put the meter up on the engine, right, now I can use both hands. So I've got a probe in each hand and the camera. So you can see that the engine has continuity, right? If I go around, so I've got one probe just on this valve cover bolt. This red probe, if I touch it anywhere on the engine, everything is continuity, right? There's continuity throughout the entire engine. So everything on the engine has a ground path. But watch what happens when I come over here to the fuselage. Here's an engine bolt. This engine bolt right here. If I touch that, nothing. If I touch anywhere on the firewall, nothing. So the fuselage is not grounded to the engine, or it's probably more appropriate to say that the engine is not grounded to the fuselage. So just because you have the engine bolted with bolts, metal bolts to the metal engine mount, and the metal engine mount is bolted to the fuselage again with bolts, you don't have a direct ground path between them. And it's because of the insulators. They're doing their job, basically. They cushion the engine mount itself, and of course they break up a ground path. So you need to be aware of that and make sure that you install a dedicated ground between the engine and either the engine and the battery, or the engine and someplace on the fuselage. All right. Talk to you guys later. Howdy, everyone. Okay, so now I am working on these drain back lines for the oil. Each individual cylinder has one. They use a 3/8 aluminum line. One end is an AN fitting that goes into each individual cylinder head, and then the other end is attached with a piece of rubber hose that gets attached to a barb fitting that screws into the oil sump. So it's these individual lines that I'm working on now. And again, the lines that I have came with the engine. So I've got those, I'm reusing those just because I'm lazy. I don't feel like remaking them. I wish I could replace the fittings. I did replace the nuts with better looking nuts, but I don't have black. I only have blue. The fittings that were on here were blue. So these ferrules are blue. These are the ferrules that came with the lines, obviously, because you can't get the ferrules off. But I did replace the nuts. Those slid off this other end here. But preferably I'd like to have black, but I am not going to cut the tubes apart just to switch the color of the ferrule and nut. So all I did was clean these really well inside and out, and now I am fitting the rubber tube. So here's what I'm using. I'm using one of these, I don't know exactly what they're called. What is it called? It's called a clamp tight. But this is the tool that I bought. This is to make your own, using safety wire, you can make your own hose clamps. So that's what I'm using. I've got one done here. This is my second attempt. My first attempt is already on the airplane, the one that I just showed you. It's pretty simple, and I like it so much better than the run-of-the-mill hose clamps. I didn't cover how to use the tool because there are instructional videos on YouTube already that are quite good. So I'm not going to rehash how to do that. But there are some advantages to using these, which I prefer, of course. And of course, it's lighter weight safety wire than a regular hose clamp. So let me go back over here. I should be a little bit more organized. So this is the hose clamp that came with the engine, and this is what I had pulled off of the engine when I disassembled it to clean it and repaint it and all that good stuff. So this is your typical stainless steel hose clamp, and this is what was used before. You can see there's quite a difference between the mass of this contraption and the safety wire. So I prefer the safety wire. The other advantage, people talk about how when you tighten these hose clamps, they only tighten basically in 1 or 2 dimensions. You don't get a what do I want to say? I'm lacking the word. But anyway, you don't get a oh well. It doesn't seal completely all the way around. You get just certain spots that tighten up and other spots don't. That is not an issue with the safety wire using this particular tool. I don't have proof of that. That's just what I've heard. That's what people talk about on the videos. So the other reason why I don't like to use these is here is a piece of tube. Here it is. Here's one of the old pieces of tubing that came off of my engine. And look at that. You could see where the hose clamp has dug into the tube and has pretty much ruined it. Now, of course, whoever tightened the clamp obviously way over tightened it, right? So there is no need for this at all. But anyway, not a fan of the original type of hose clamps. I'm giving this safety wire deal a shot and see what happens. So that's what I'm working on now. I'm going to go ahead and get these other 3 tubes in place, and I may start putting the tubes, the big, what are they, 1.5-inch, 2-inch intake tubes might be next. So talk to you guys here shortly. Howdy everyone. So I'm going to explain real quick how I put these tubes in place. Mostly this focuses on getting the 45-degree fitting in the right location. So here's how I do it. I put my thread sealant on the fitting. This of course is a mess. This will get cleaned off. When I get done cleaning this, you won't be able to tell there was any sealant on there. But anywho, put your sealant on the fitting, screw the fitting in by hand, put a wrench on it, and spin it around until it's tight, or almost tight. You want to get it so that it basically hangs down like you see this one here, but tight. From here, you only need to tighten it just a little bit more to get the angle correct. So make sure you spin it around so it's basically pointing down, but tight, because from here you're only going to tighten it maybe another 1/8 of a turn, if that. Don't kill it, right? These are aluminum heads. This is an aluminum fitting. Let the sealant that you put on the threads do its job. You don't have to kill these. Okay, so with that said, then you take your pre-bent tube, hand tighten the tube onto the fitting. At that point, you can put a wrench on the fitting, and you can, if I back up a little bit, you can rotate the fitting clockwise to tighten it. And you can also take the tube and rotate the tube about the nut. With those 2 adjustments, you want to bring the tube, I know the lighting sucks, you want to bring the tube so that the end of it lines up perfectly with the fitting coming out of the sump. So look at it from multiple angles. You want to look at it front to back, and you want to look at it bottom to top, and make sure that it is in line with the fitting coming out of the sump. And again, you do that by putting a wrench on the fitting, rotate the fitting tighter, And you can also make sure you hand tighten the nut, because you don't want the tube to be flopping around. You want it sturdy enough that you know that this is lined up correctly here. You don't want to come back with the tube being loose, get it lined up, and then you tighten your nut and it moves the end of the tube. So this needs to be tight enough to support the tube, but if you need to, you can also move the tube around the nut and as well move the fitting. Between those two, get your line perfectly in line with the fitting coming out of the sump. At that point, you know now that this 45-degree fitting is in the right location. You can leave it like it is, spin your nut off, take the line out, and put your piece of rubber tubing in here. At this point, before you remove the tube, you can get a length. You can get in here with a small ruler of some sort and figure out how long to make this tube. Once you do that, then you can take the nut off, take the line out, and put your tube on. Now, unfortunately, let me go back over on the other side here. Unfortunately, I cannot use my safety wire tool back here on this end of the tube, on the hose, just because there's no room to use the tool in here. So I had no choice but to put the standard type of hose clamps back here. You do what you can with what you have, right? So I cleaned the clamp up really nice, and I've got it on there. Again, I'm not going to kill anything. I'm going to let the rubber tubing do its job and seal. Now, I may get some leaks when I run the engine, but that's okay. That's expected. I'll tighten these up as I need to, if I need to. And if not, then I'll leave them just like they are. So let me make up a couple more tubes. I'll talk to you guys later.